Hello, my name is Terry Hinton, and this presentation is going to be on the primary elements of a budget in higher education. A budget has two main elements, which is revenue, which is monies coming in, and expenses, which are monies going out. Now, if there was unlimited revenue, we wouldn't worry about making a budget because you'd have enough money to appease everyone inside the organization. But since revenues are limited, we need to justify where this money is going to be spent. The idea with a good organization is that they have more revenue incoming than they have expenses going out. There are many different sources of revenue for a school, and depending on the type of institution, they may vary quite a bit in where the majority of the funds come from. Funds can come from state appropriated funds, and these are taxpayer monies, tuition, usually based on a per hour or a full-time status for a student. There are student fees, and these are broken down into mandatory and special fees. Mandatory fees being technology fees, recreation fees, student services, and activity fees, whereas special fees may be a one-time fee, such as entering a special program, or if there is some type of special expense for a certain type of course. Endowments can be a really large lump of money given from a private donor that can be restricted or open to be used in any operational expenses. Gifts are another one that come from outside sources such as alumni friends, businesses, and other entities. And then there's also grants and contracts. This is mostly coming from research type activities where they file for grants and it helps pay for some of the personnel expenses that go along with that. And then there may be contracts that they do with some kind of outside organization where they provide a service for pay. And then there are several other incomes that include special programs, auxiliary services, contracted institutional services, if they have a hospital for a learning hospital, licensing, patents, and royalties, so they do license their image, and anytime it's used in any purpose, they do get some source of income from that, and also from certain religious services. Outside of the normal revenue channels that I've discussed from the previous slide, there can also be very large one-time budgets considered to be capital budgets, and these can be for new facilities or to renovate existing facilities. These are usually high dollar items and can come from either the state government or in certain cases, if there is a need, the federal government may step in and decide it is essential to help build a certain type of services for a program. This chart shows a breakdown of national averages for where revenue comes from for different types of colleges. As you can see, for a public university, a majority of funding typically comes from government grants, contracts, and appropriations. Now, this can vary state to state. In private for-profit colleges, typically most of the revenue comes from tuition and fees, and then a small amount comes from the other components. Private nonprofit are closely associated with public universities, meaning they are eligible for some of the same funding, although there is competition for how those funds are going to be distributed. I think one section of the revenue needs to be discussed a little further, and that's state appropriated funds. Some states, this is the primary source for public colleges. Although this varies from state to state, all states do provide some type of funds for public universities. The problem with this is it is subject to public opinion. Every 4 years, you may have a change in government in the state, and with that, a change in policy. Those policies may affect how much funding a university receives. As we've seen from the previous slides, there are many different sources of revenue for a college. The totality of these revenues are added together to give us an idea of how much we can spend on expenses. The U.S. Department of Education lumps these expenses into several broad categories. Of those categories, instructional expenses and support services make up the bulk of all expenses at a university. Instructional expenses include salaries and benefits, and program supplies and services pertinent to the actual instruction of students. Support services are all the other functions that go in to help the student to achieve success. This can be admissions, student activities, library, administrative and executive activities. So this includes quite a few different areas of expenses. The other categories include research and public services. Research can be an integral part of a university, and making sure that they get that information out to the public in the community and beyond can be central to their strategy. Another is grant aid that is given to students. In many universities, this is taken from other students' tuition to give the students that are in need. If a school has a learning hospital associated with them, they may have expenses with the operation and maintenance of that as well. There may be other auxiliary expenses as well as operation expenses. The operational expenses are typically ran by a central physical plant department. This chart from the U.S. Department of Education shows a breakdown of expenses by different university types. As we mentioned, instructional expenses in dark purple and student support services with the dashed purple lines make up the bulk of expenses at all universities. And then the breakout of how other expenses are incurred depends on the facilities themselves. In conclusion, the budgeting process within a university is a very complex system where there's multiple sources of revenue and multiple outlets for expenses. Since the budget components may vary from year to year, and this may be the effects of the economy or public opinion, citing that there's more funds or less funds available, it's important for the university to try to mitigate some of this uncertainty. One of the best things that the university can do is situate its shared governance to make sure it's gathering information in a way that allows for all the stakeholders to be involved. And in this, they need to create their mission specific to the strategies that work well for the organization. And in doing so, make sure that they guide expenses towards meeting the strategic objectives. If you have any questions or comments about my presentation, feel free to post them in our discussion board online. I look forward to hearing from you.